Welcome to podcast episode number 17 of the ISPC Tailboard Talks. I'm your host, Mark. Along with me is my co-host, back from a little hiatus, Mr. Jerry. How you doing today, buddy?
I'm good, man. Good to be back. You've been quite busy without me.
Yeah, we did a little swing to Alaska last week, so we caught a couple folks up there and had some interesting conversations. I guess I never really thought about it, but Alaska is not your average workday when it comes to the electric utility industry, for sure. I mean, some of the things that they got to go through to get work done, you just kind of shake your head and you never really think about it. You know, even something as simple as, hey, I need a transformer over here. A lot of times it's not, hey, just put the thing on the truck and drive it up there, right? It's there's places they got to go by air and so on. So it was a pretty interesting conversation.
Yeah, and sometimes days are a lot longer than you think too. So
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, linemen are used to working like long hours, but when the day is 23 hours,
yes, yeah,
that makes something. That's a whole nother animal.
Yeah. And cold as well. We had some, I think one morning we got up and headed to the training building. It was -2. So.
Yeah, I'm good. I'll stay in Louisiana.
There's cold and then there's cold.
Well, I say that.
Yeah.
I say that I was out. I was in Colorado and ended up with 34 inches of snow for the first snowstorm of the season in Metro Denver area, and it shut down all of the interstates and everything, and reminded me why I like living in the South. So,
all right. So today's podcast, we got a very special guest coming up just in a little bit that we'll get to, and looking forward to some conversations with him. And so today, our title of our podcast is Safety, the Human Factor. We'll talk a lot about that as we go through the next hour here or so. But, again, looking forward to touching on that.
And those of you listening will probably recognize the voice of our guest today. If you've been to any incident prevention conference, in the last 8 years or so, 7 years. I mean, the guy's got a very distinctive voice and he's got a very good message, and he puts it out there. And if you haven't heard it or seen it, you'll get to see a little bit of it. But I'm sure he'll be in Charlotte at the Incident Prevention Show in April. And then Charleston, I'm sorry. Yep. I knew it started with a C. In Charleston. And then if you missed that one, you can always pick up the Incident Prevention magazine, some bi-monthly, I believe.
Yep.
And it's absolutely free. Some of the best information for our industry, bar none, in that magazine. It's digital. It's hard copy. Guys, go ahead, and I'm sure we can find out from David how to sign up to subscribe to get that magazine or that issue digitally and hard copy wise. But it is a phenomenal piece of literature for our industry, and I'm really excited to hear what David has to say. So before we do all that, I got to tell you, today's show brought to you by T&D PowerSkills. These days, safety and training managers are challenged with the task of controlling their line worker training programs. And it all comes down to control. If you have control of your message, if you have control of your delivery, and if you have control of your costs, you will have a very effective training program, one that you can send the guys home safely at night. So if you want to know all about T&D PowerSkills, look us up online, tdpowerskills.com. Take control of your line worker training program, and if you log in and go use the referral code TAILBOARD2024, TAILBOARD 2024, you'll get an exclusive podcast listener 5% discount if you decide to go with T&D PowerSkills as your training program. And you can always look me up online, Jerry at tdpowerskills.com. Shoot me an email. I'll be happy to talk to you about it.
Yeah, man. Perfect.
Actually, I've gotten several, being on the road and the last few months, I've gotten several compliments from people who have used our program recently, who picked it up recently, and those who've been using it for a long time, and they've both said the same thing. This is the most effective training that we've implemented in our apprenticeship program. It's just phenomenal. I'm a fan. I'd be a fan if I didn't work for them. So
Yeah, man. All right. In our ISPC Tailboard Talk topic today, we're going to touch on human performance. I know this is near and dear to our guest's heart today as well, so I'm sure he'll have some things to add when we get to that point. But I kind of just wanted to talk about some of the core principles of human performance, right? And so we'll touch a little bit on those along with a couple other things, and then we'll get into talking to Dave today. So,
And it seems to be a word that's used a lot, and it covers quite a broad topic. So let's narrow it down a little bit, Mark.
yeah, you're right. I think, depending who you talk to, people may have different feelings on human performance. But, I think the first thing is that we need to understand is people are fallible, right? We're going to make mistakes. Doesn't matter how much you try. I have heard the senior leaders in organizations say that we can eliminate every mistake and incident. It's just not going to happen, right? People are going to make mistakes. And so once we recognize that, and the other thing that's interesting to point out is a lot of times the mistakes come from our most experienced workers. And I have some theories on that. I'm sure Dave does. It's just, I think, as time goes on and as we do more work in our career, our tolerance for risk and our acceptance of risk gets larger, right? We tend to not look at some of the more simple things as having much risk. And so I think those are some things that kind of lead to maybe our more experienced workers making mistakes versus our younger. If you're new or green to the industry, you're a little more on edge. You ask a little more questions. You ask why a little bit more. Those type of things. And as we get experience and time in our positions, some of those things tend to go away. And so it's really up to the organizations that you're working for, our employers, to develop or design systems to help the human, the employee, not to make mistakes, right? And things, procedures and processes and things like that. And so we'll get into a little bit more of that, I'm sure, as we go through the conversation here. The other thing, another principle of human performance is error likely situations can be predicted, right? And we do it all the time when we do electrical work, right? We identify hazards, we put mitigation strategies in place to help those hazards or to keep those hazards from getting us. And that's one thing that we use. I think, we often talk about the complex tasks or the unfamiliar tasks or things that we don't do that often. In my opinion, those are the easy things, right? Because again, your awareness is heightened, you're on your game, you're thinking about it because you haven't done it in a while. I think the ones that tend to get us more are the things we do all the time, where we don't necessarily stop and think about what we're about to do, right? I do this 50 times a day. So we tend to let our guard down, right? That perception of risk gets less and less and less. Um, Behaviors is a big one, right? And while the individual has a big part in their behavior and how they look at things and respond to things, the organization has just as much of the piece of the pie when it comes to individual behaviors, right? If the culture of an organization, the leadership of an organization does not provide the proper environment for their people, they can almost guide individuals into making mistakes, right? And so, as much as the individual has a part in this, the organization has just as much of a part, right? And then, what does the organization provide their employees, right? The tools, the processes, the procedures, the training, all those things go into employees being able to work safely and efficiently day in and day out without making mistakes, right? And then I think the last one, just to touch on, is learning, right? We always have to continue to learn. One, when you talk learning, you talk training, right? And that's a big piece of it. But we also need to learn from our near misses, good catches, those type of things. Share those in the organization. Let people know what's going on. It's not out there to say, "Oh, look what he did wrong," right? That's the wrong message out. We got to be taking these opportunities to allow our organization and our people to grow and learn from their mistakes, and hopefully not get themselves in that predicament again, and at the end of the day, hopefully save somebody else from making the same near miss or near mistake that you have made. So
Yeah. And going back to that, Mark, that goes up back up the tier with the organizational context as well. So you have to feel comfortable to share the near misses and share the hey, this is how I messed up, and not be, afraid of the organization coming down on you and like, oh, all that, the manly macho stuff that has
yeah,
been that we've done, in the past. So you have
yeah,
to create that good environment to share those misses and those catches and those, not being afraid to seek out the learning opportunity from it.
and that truly has to come from the top down.
Mm-hmm.
If there is any individual in your senior leadership tree that does not believe in openness and learning versus retribution or discipline when it comes to incidents, your
Mm-hmm.
people will not report, because they will know in the back of their mind, if I say something, I'm going to look like the idiot, or I'm going to be in trouble, or whatever the case may be. And so it has to be a organizational culture shift. It just does. I went through it with the utility I worked at. Probably about 10 years ago, we had a new president, senior leader that came into our organization. And believe me, it was a humongous shift in what, the culture was at that organization. And it took years to get there, but they finally did through his persistence and basically telling his leadership team, listen, this is how we're going to do it. You can disagree with me. I'll explain my reasonings, but this is how we're going to do it. And we are going to be an organization of learning, not an organization of discipline. And it, it will bear the fruits of your labor if you just give it time to get there.
Yeah, and again, like you said, it takes years. It can take years to build, but inversely, it can take just that long to tear
Yep.
it down. So you got to be
Yeah,
careful. Be very conscious of the environment that you are building.
that's right. Yep. So,
Now, Mark, I know we've got a little bit more on the key components, but
yep.
before we get it, I would like to go ahead and get David in here
Yeah.
and have him speak a lot more on that, because he is a published author, twice
Yep.
published author
Yep.
of several a couple of books, and he's spoken on this a couple of times, but
Yeah,
just
so
a few,
so
right?
let me why don't I just go ahead? I'll jump ahead just a little, and then we'll come back and finish up our tailboard talk. But
Yeah,
let me just I'll go ahead and introduce Dave, and then we'll finish up our tailboard talk and get his input, and then we'll move on to our guest segment. So
absolutely.
without further ado, if you haven't realized it by now, our guest today is David McPeak, who is the Director of Education and Professional Development at Utility Business Media. He's also an author, has a couple books out, Frontline Leadership, The Hurdle, and Frontline Incident Prevention, The Hurdle. And so, welcome, Dave. It's a pleasure to have you, man.
Mark, Jerry, thank you. It's an honor to be here. What I hope right now is I don't ruin what you're doing. And that tailgate talk is fantastic.
No,
I'm taking some notes.
no. Actually, man, I wanted you in here on this because what we have lined out to talk about in the tailboard talk is the stuff that you actually teach on and speak to. And I am not that guy. I'm the color commentary here, so I figured we'd get you in and have a little more intelligent conversation on both sides with me in the
Yeah,
middle. As the color commentary sandwich on this, so
yeah.
because you guys know what you're doing.
Yeah, so I guess before we go on to some of the key components there, Dave, is there anything you kind of want to add to the what I call the core principles of human performance?
You covered them really well. The thing I would say, human performance, I always caution people with a couple of things. Number one, if your culture's not right, you said it, human performance is not going to work.
Yep.
And then number two, the other thing, I don't want to call it a mistake because people do it with good intentions, but we overcomplicate it and we make it some big, huge, impossible program to implement. And we get into statistics and things that don't appeal to the frontline workers. And that's one of the things in everything that I try to do. It's got to appeal to the frontline workers. And so the way I very simply like to explain it is it's twofold. From a organizational perspective and a leadership perspective, I like to say it's lead people, not robots. And that's a great way to think about human performance because we've historically, if we're honest, treated people like robots. We assume we can program them, i.e., tell them what to do and they're going to listen to us. That's not right.
Nope.
And we assume that when they're performing whatever task it is they're doing, that they're not going to make mistakes. You explained that well, Mark. They're going to make mistakes. We make an average of 5 mistakes an hour,
Yep.
according to a lot of studies. Most time they're insignificant mistakes. We're not aware we're making them, but they're there.
Yep.
And so I like to say that we have to lead and protect people rather than managing robots and pleasing systems. And we'll talk about that pleasing systems concept in a minute. So that's
Yep.
the first part. Then the second part is, so now if I'm a worker, if I'm the person doing a task, I've got to understand and realize not that I can make a mistake, I'm going to.
Hmm.
And so what am I going to do to protect myself? And then this becomes a challenge because the better organizations and culture and human performance get at protecting people, and holy cow, the PPE and the protective equipment that we've got now, the more people feel protected, the less they feel the need to protect themselves. And so it starts with risk tolerance and then overconfidence both in yourself and protective equipment. And so that is to me one of the more important parts of human performance is people using those tools, valuing those tools to protect themselves from their mistakes.
Couldn't agree
And
more.
personally, I think 5 mistakes an hour is rookie numbers. I mean, I've got a way higher record than that, but
Yeah. Yeah. Most of us do. Okay. So the second part of the tailboard talk, I just wanted to touch on some key components that we use to help stop or reduce incidents, those types of things. Obviously, you got your job briefings. I think I've kind of had the opportunity to work with some companies around job briefings, and I think it's one of the tools that could be one of the best tools we have at our disposal to keep us and our coworkers safe, and we don't use it how we should be using it. And I'm not going to get into a lot of that. I'm not going to go down that rabbit trail too far, but I think too often the job briefing is seen as checking the box, right? Something I have to do because my company tells me I have to do it. And that is the total wrong outlook. This job briefing should be looked at as if I do this properly and conduct this properly, nothing's going to happen to me, right? I'm going to recognize the hazards that are there. We're going to put proper tools in place to mitigate them. We're going to keep ourselves from having those incidents jump up and bite us. And so shifting that mindset is a monumental task in our industry. So again, I don't want to go too we could probably have at least a full podcast on nothing but job briefings for sure. And
yeah.
I don't know, maybe write that one down, Jerry. That might be Dave's second visit after the new year. Maybe we'll have to bring him back for round two. Then there's some other things, right? You got self checks and peer checks, and stop work authority is a big one. I think, some companies do it well. Some are still missing the boat on stop work authority. They say they do it, but, their culture would suggest differently, right? And then, we have
Mm-hmm.
to, again, I don't want to stress on it too much, but you have to have that leadership and culture that's willing to give you the tools and the time to be able to do this stuff, right? It's not, it takes what it takes. right? If you're going to do a proper job briefing and hazard identification and mitigation and those type of things, it takes what it takes for the job at hand. It can't be, well, you got 5 minutes to do your tailboard, right? Or whatever the case may be. It's got to be, the time's got to be given and the support's got to be given from leadership to reinforce these things and to provide feedback where feedback is needed, right? Another thing that tends to, I guess, two more things that tend to play into this human performance or how humans perform. One is fatigue, right? And we often we just went through in the utility industry one heck of a last 2 months, right? With probably half the country in Florida and Georgia and North Carolina working, just extremely crazy hours, and understanding that as people get fatigued and they get tired and they get foggy in the brain, things don't work as well, right? We have to even put more steps in place to recognize that and understand that, it's no different than if you're driving down the road and you've been on the road for 10 or 12 hours, you are just not as clear as you were when you started out that morning. And so we got to recognize that. We got to do other things to help keep our people safe when those long hours come into play. And then probably the last one I'll just touch on is training and competence, right? We need to make sure our people are properly trained, not only in our job, what we do, our craft training, right? But doing proper job briefings and all this human performance stuff, you got to be trained in it. You got to understand it. You got to know why you're doing it so that you can be effective in doing it, right? It's not just, oh, hey, go fill out this piece of paper, document what you think you're going to run into, and go on down the road. So I think there's definitely some improvement opportunities there as well. So I'll shut up. I'll let you guys add it.
We've talked in the past, Mark, about teaching the why of things, not just the how. The how is always going to be the how, but the why is going to be different every time. Sometimes, I mean, you've got, why are we doing the job briefing, and why are we mentioning the things that we're mentioning on this job briefing? Why are we doing this? And that changes. Those whys on that specific job briefing are going to change multiple times throughout the day sometimes.
Yep.
So you have to, then that changes the whole scenario.
No, I couldn't agree more.
Right, David?
So, yes. And somebody set a timer and stop me about a minute from now, because the job briefings, right, in human performance, you got modes, you got traps, you got triggers, you got tools. And it's a trigger for me every time I hear the word. So I mentioned this concept earlier. I call it pleasing the system. And job briefings is where that manifests itself worse than anywhere I've ever seen. And again, it's with good intentions, but it's safety people and management that have ruined job briefings, because how do we evaluate them? We look at the form, and what are we entirely focused on? Getting that freaking form right. And
Yep.
so what is then the folks in the field, what are they focused on? Getting the form right. And here's the
Yep.
thing, there is no way in a 10-minute, I don't care if it lasts 30 minutes, in the start of the day before you go to work, that you're going to plan out and do your work for the day. So, two quick
Nope.
thoughts about job briefings for me. Number one, I don't want to say completely forget about the form. If you got to fill one out, fill it out, document it as appropriate. But that's not even, who cares about the form? A sheet of
Yep.
paper has never saved somebody's life.
Yep.
And so focus on it as a communication tool, and communication needs to result in mutual understanding. And so if you've satisfied yourself that there's mutual understanding at the end of a job briefing, it's a good briefing. If you've satisfied yourself you got the form right, it's not a good briefing.
Yep.
And then the other thing is, make sure you supplement the pre-job briefing with another HP tool, 2-minute drills. I like to call them huddles. And so, when we're switching tasks, when there's short delays, minor changes, huddle up real quick. The example of a football team, they huddle. What are we going to do for the next 4 seconds of our life? We need to huddle more and talk about how we're going to protect lives.
Yep.
And then also the after action review, a post job briefing. And so think of job briefings more as a process than that one time singular event, with the goal of making ourselves safer and not the goal of getting that sheet right. So I did pretty good for my job briefing soapbox there.
Yeah, I I I like to say, Dave, similar to you, right? The way I look at it is the morning job briefing, right? The initial job briefing to start the day is the plan, the original plan, right? Here's what we think is going to happen. But then you are absolutely right. If you aren't having at least two, three, four huddles throughout the day, you're not doing it right, because I have never in my life seen a job that went exactly how you planned it on that morning job briefing. It just doesn't happen. And then the second thing that I've been really stressing when I go out and work with companies, and part of that training is the job briefing, is this thing is meant to be a conversation between the work crew. If your organization, if you have a crew lead sitting in a truck filling out the tailboard, or filling out the tailboard before you leave the shop in the morning, or any of the above, if you are not all standing in a group, meaning if you're doing the job briefing, you shouldn't have two or three of your workers prepping work and getting things ready, right? And you shouldn't have people doing other tasks when you're doing the job briefing, right? And I even go as to far, I started to have people, my opinion, if you almost ought to define who's going to do the tasks before you even talk about the job briefing and the hazards. Because for me, if I'm leading the job briefing, I'm going to say, Dave, today you're going to be working in the bucket today. What's some of the hazards you're going to encounter? And let you tell me what you think you're going to encounter. You're the one that's going to do the work, not me, right? And then the rest of the group can chime in. Oh, well, don't forget about this, Dave, or did you consider this, and those type of things. And then, okay, Dave, now that you got your three or four hazards that you may run into, what are you going to do to protect yourself? And then let the rest of the group chime in. And that really gets that conversation going. But the one biggest thing it does for me is, as the crew lead, now I know if Dave's in the game today. I know if your brain's in the game. I know what kind of sort of mood you're in for the day. Are you all there? Are you ready to do that work? And so those are just a couple things that I tend to preach and try to get people to work towards.
Yeah, because the other thing about that, if you've got one person writing and reading the job briefing, as a lot of people like to phrase it, that's one person's risk tolerance. That's one
Yep.
person's work methods. That's one person. So I couldn't agree more about the group conversation. I love rotating the responsibility around,
Yep.
just getting people involved in that job briefing. So much power. And we've, OSHA says 1910-269, right? The employee in charge must conduct a job briefing. And so when I do training, I spend a lot of time helping people define that word conduct. A lot of people
Yep.
take that to mean I have to do it. And
Nope.
you do have to make sure it's done
Yep.
100% for sure. But if you're I would argue, right? If you're the only one talking and you're the only opinion that's on that sheet of paper,
Yep.
don't even bother with the job briefing. I mean,
No. Yeah, I couldn't agree
This-
more. That, to me, that statement is, you just need to, as the lead, make sure that it's done and done properly.
right.
And you can conduct it just by standing there watching it happen. It's no different than a conductor in an orchestra, right? He isn't playing the instruments or singing or doing whatever. He's just making sure everything goes correctly and make sure they get to the end goal. And that's all this is, right?
Mhm.
I don't like that word conduct either. I wish they would change that word to something else. Is responsible for making sure it's done properly, or something to that effect.
Facilitate.
Facilitate, yeah, that's another good one. So,
Lead, not
yep,
Well,
lead.
in this industry, it kind of works because we work a lot on conductors. And what's
that's
the
right.
whole point of a conductor,
Yeah.
right? It gets
Yeah,
electricity from point A to point B. Good way of thinking about the job brief. You're
yeah,
getting the work plan from point A to point B. Uh, so it is a good tool.
yeah. All right. Well, hey, that was probably one of the best tailboard talks we've had in a long time. So appreciate your input, Dave. And
I was going to
Jerry?
say, it's not because I'm back.
You had some good stuff too.
Hey guys, just
All
a
right.
reminder: this podcast is brought to you by T&D Power Skills. You need good training, and you need control of that good training. So you can't just throw training up in the air and it'll magically hit everybody, and everybody will know everything just from osmosis. You need good training. So we have good training. T&D Power Skills is a comprehensive 78-unit curriculum designed with the adult learner in mind. Control your message by customizing the program to meet your needs and your training requirements. Control your delivery with the flexibility to scale from a single unit for refresher training to a fully DOL certified 8,000 hour apprenticeship program. And control your costs. Flexible delivery models scale from companies with just a few crews or a few linemen to large utilities and contractors with 1,000+ line workers. And we do have some of those. To learn more, all you got to do is visit us online, tdpowerskills.com. Shoot me an email, Jerry at tdpowerskills.com, Jerry at tdpowerskills.com. tdpowerskills.com. Use the referral code tailboard2024. Get an exclusive podcast listener 5% discount. Guys, I'm telling you, once you see this program and see how it fits and see how it takes all the adult learning principles in mind and uses them all properly, you can't beat this program at all. And you control everything. So that makes it even more exciting to me. So come check us
Cool.
out, man. tdpowerskills.com. So now back to it.
Thanks, Terry. Yeah. So now let's jump into our guest segment. So we already introduced Dave. Everybody knows who Dave is. But I guess to dive a little further, Dave, tell us a little bit about your career path to where you're at today. What was that journey like for Dave?
Like most people, I never had any aspirations, thoughts, or ambition to be in safety. I got appointed there, and so
Okay.
I worked for a large electrical contractor. Long story short, I worked in the fleet department. The guy at the time that was the vice president of fleet got promoted to the executive vice president and brought me with him and put me in the safety department. Had no clue what I was doing. Tried to learn as much as I could pretty quickly. But we're really in that process where I found my niche was when I started doing training. And so a lot of people don't believe me about this, but if you ever met me in just in a private, personal kind of environment, I'm a very quiet, shy person. Um, and I literally, the first time I ever stood in front of a group and started doing training, in the back of my mind, I was standing like, who is this guy? And I, so, and I found out that I really, really, really enjoyed that. And so the experience there, I worked there for about 10 years, and that was just absolutely fantastic. That was at Pike Electric. Love Pike, great organization. They get into a whole lot of stuff from engineering all the way through construction and procurement and whatever else, and a bunch of different customers, do a lot of different kind of work. So it exposed me to a lot of things about this industry. A lot of things I kept learning what I didn't know. So that was a real good learning path for me. And then this opportunity at UBM, Utility Business Media, presented itself, and it's really just such a blessing to work for that organization. It's an organization that its whole goal really is education, networking, and information for the utility industry. So we from the CUSP certification to a couple of magazines, our IP conference, the forums that we do. I run the Incident Prevention Institute, which is the education arm of that. And so I love that organization. And the reason I love it is not so much because of the organization, although I love the people there. It's the community and the network of folks that come to our forums, come to our conferences, the folks that have the CUSP certification. I've never seen a group more interested in sharing and learning and networking from each other. And I almost say, and it's critical, I'm largely responsible at the conference for lining up our educational agenda and whatnot. And I say it as a joke, but I think more education goes on in the halls and at break than does in the breakout sessions. It's just truly amazing to watch the people that come there, how willing they are to share and learn. So uh, that excites me, and I love what I do, and I love just watching people grow and learning things.
Yeah.
Especially more the soft skills, life skills kind of thing.
Hmm.
The better you are at communication, we were talking about job briefings. You're going to do better job briefings. The more you understand concepts of leadership and culture, the more you're going to be able, as Jerry said earlier, to explain the why and not just the how. And so that's a lot really of what we focus on is the more the art of safety than the science of safety, if that makes sense.
Before we kind of go down the road of UBM and IP and that type of stuff, I'd like to dig a little bit more in there. But as you mentioned in your introduction, you got a couple books out there, and so tell us a little bit about those. Maybe what led you to, because I'm sure it's not an easy task. I've never written one. Maybe I will someday. I don't know. I don't know if I have enough information to put in a book. Maybe I do, but it's so what what led you. I know a lot of people do it. A lot of people in our industry have taken the time to write a book, and tell us what led you there and kind of what they're about.
And that's got to be like nerve wracking. That's got to be asking the prettiest girl to dance. I mean, seriously, you're setting yourself up for rejection. But you got to know what you're doing, man.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's like, when you take a test, I always say this because I do a lot of preparation for some certifications, and I always tell people the hardest question on the test is when you're done and it says, "Would you like to submit?" So writing a book is actually very easy. Would you like to publish? Is where the challenge is, right? And so just in all the training I do and some of the stories you share with people, so people had mentioned, "Hey, you should write a book sometime," and I never really took that serious. And then, I just started thinking about, again, our goal: education and networking
Hmm.
and information and sharing. So in addition to the magazine, some people like to listen to podcasts, some people like to read, some people like virtual training, whatever else. And so both those books are really highly derived from our frontline training program. And it's just kind of another way, either before or after, during class, to get that same information out, just in whatever format that people want it. And then the
Hmm.
first book was fairly successful, and it was focused a lot on leadership. And then my passion, obviously, is safety. And so that was where that came from. Both the books, at a high level, have the hurdle in the title. It's Frontline, our frontline program, the hurdle, or Frontline Leadership, the hurdle, Frontline Incident Prevention, the hurdle. That's the title of the book. The reason for that is leadership, safety leadership, combine those two. Those are hard things, right? And there's specific things associated with them, like coaching feedback, dealing with difficult people, leading change, whatever those things may be, that are hard. So things that are hard, I like to define as hurdles. And then if you think about getting over a hurdle in track and field, and I love this analogy, if you go stand still in front of a hurdle and try to jump over it, it's not going to happen. It's either going to be very hard, or depending on how high the hurdle is, you're not going to get over it. What's really important is the run up. And so in terms of leadership and safety, to a certain extent, that run up is creating culture and developing relationships. The better you do those two things, the easier it is to get over those hurdles. And so in a one sentence summary, that's what's in the book, is the run up to the hurdles.
Hmm.
Create culture, develop relationships. Get those two things right. Everything else you do will fall into place. If in the absence of those, the wrong kind of culture, a toxic culture, the absence of relationships, negative relationships, it's almost impossible to be an effective safety leader.
You mentioned a little bit about what utility business media does. Maybe just give an overview of kind of what they provide the industry, right? And what all's out there. I know they do a lot of things and so on. And then after that, we'll kind of dive a little bit into IP and what goes on there. So.
Sounds good. So, the first thing is three magazines, and they're all free. So there's Incident Prevention Magazine, there's Utility Fleet Professional Magazine, and then there's a new one, a Utility Security Magazine. And really, I it's kind of like Jerry said earlier, right? I agree. Even though I work there, I'm going to say, like, I would read that. I read it before I worked there. Matter of fact,
Hmm.
Hmm.
I was on the editorial board. I loved it so much. There is a lot of good stuff in there.
Hmm.
Just the folks that volunteer their time to write the articles and whatnot. So that's part of what utility business. A big part is those three magazines. the IP Utility Safety Conference and Expo twice a year. It's just a great event for truly education and networking. I mean, if you haven't been to one, come to one, try it out. I just guarantee you'll love it. You both speak at it. It speaks to the quality of speakers we have, and it's just an amazing event. So that's twice a year, and then the education we do through the Incident Prevention Institute. One of the highlights of which, another free thing that we do, and honestly, one of my favorite days of the month, and I'm not joking when I say that, is it's usually the second Friday of every month at 11 o'clock Eastern time, is our IPI forum. And what the IPI forum is, it's in a virtual format. You log in through Zoom. We provide a panel of subject matter experts, and it literally is just people come, and if you've got anything you want to know about the utility industry, what's going on, standards, regulations, challenges, leadership, safety, how to ground a transmission line, technical, non-technical, we get into a lot of stuff, and our panel, the subject matter experts that volunteer their time for it, and I really can't thank ISPC enough. That's a big part of that, and so you, Jim, Mac, just volunteering your time, but it's just such a good opportunity for people to come network a little bit. And I love the fact how many questions get submitted ahead of time. There's a LinkedIn group with it too to kind of keep the conversation going. But that's definitely something everybody should check out. Is that forum? It is just.
Yeah.
I say all the time. I mean, if you can get in front of the likes of a Mark or a Jim Vone or a Danny Rain and be able to ask them questions for free and
Yeah.
let them answer it. We used to call that Stump the Chump when it was just Jim and Danny early on.
Yeah.
And they named it, not me. I'm not making fun of it. That's where they go. And I still issue that challenge every now and then. You know, if it's November now when we have the forum, hey, before December, somebody try to think of a question that Jim and Danny cannot answer together.
Yeah.
2 months ago, somebody had one, at least during the live forum, that they weren't sure about. They answered it. And with the caveat, we're not sure. We're going to go look this up. Guess what they found out?
They were right.
They were 100% right. And
Yeah,
so,
always.
don't miss that opportunity to get in front of people like that.
Yeah.
And just to be able to talk to those two and get their, so I've seen both of them at an IP conference. Both of them went overtime because nobody wanted to leave. They were getting inundated with questions, and it was just it was a like you said, it was a stump the chump thing, but they were just asking questions left and right. And you had guys that had been in the industry for 15 years, and you had guys that were first year apprentices, and they were answering questions to each level in between and doing it improperly. So if you have, like David said, if you have the opportunity to make that forum, that online forum, dude, don't miss that. If it's free, yes, please.
Yes. You know what? And I say this very intentionally to give Jim and Danny both a huge compliment, but do you know, both at the IP conference and during our forums, do you know what my biggest challenge is? Getting those two on a freaking stage or in the webinar. And what I mean by that is they'll start looking at questions or somebody's name that's logged in, and they'll bring something up and they'll start talking about it and teaching it. Or like the IP conference, Danny's the worst. Only my new strategy is we invite his daughter and he listens to her. Danny's got to be on
Nice.
stage at 11. But if not at 11, to their credit, Danny will be over eating lunch with a group of people teaching a grounding class at the table. Like their passion. I mean, it's one thing for people to know as much as those two do. It's another thing to be able to explain it in a way people can understand it. And then, the third part of that is being willing to share. And I don't know that I've ever met that know as much as they do, can explain it as well as they can, and are that willing to share. They amaze me. But yeah, sometime try that. Just get those two supposed to be on stage, like at a conference in front of 300 or 400 or 500 people, and let them eat lunch at a table with some people that are going to ask questions, and see if they're on stage at 11. It's that
Herding
is,
cats, man.
yeah.
I guess we've kind of touched on both what UBM and incident prevention does. What else, I guess, from an educational or a professional development standpoint, I guess what steers IP and UBM? Like what because all right, you put on the conference and you have some of the educational stuff, but like, what's kind of steering the ship, to I guess ebb and flow with the industry because things change and so on. So what's that mechanism look like from your standpoint as far as keeping, I guess you could call it keeping relevant in the industry.
I don't want to insult our organization, but I don't know that it's our organization that does that well. It's the community that we serve that does that well. And
Okay.
back to, I mean, so they're so willing to share and tell us what they need, what they want, and I mean that part of that community is who contributes to IP Magazine, who does the presentations at our conference, who participates in the forum, both as panelists, subject matter experts, and as the participants. So
Hmm.
we rely heavily on that community. So in the Incident Prevention Institute, where we do all of our education, the highlight of that institute is our frontline program, and it's it's available online, in person, hybrid, a lot of different, but it covers, is really broken out into 3 modules, and they're structured in this order for a reason. And I said it already. So the first one's leadership, culture, sort of things. The second one is human performance, and then the third one we call incident prevention, named after the magazine. But really safety, not safety in the sense of grounding in the technical aspects, but safety in hazard recognition, risk tolerance, using the hierarchy of controls, my favorite tool personally,
Hmm.
um, that sort of thing. And so it aligns with the body of knowledge for the CUSP program. And that's kind of where it originated. But more importantly, a huge part, it's named Frontline. Our target audience is really those people conducting, as we mentioned earlier, the job briefing, right? That
Yeah.
employee in charge. People call them different things. But to me, that is a key role in an organization. And it's a disservice because not just in the utility industry, but construction as a whole, what you find is you get, in our case, somebody that's a topped out line worker, and they get then a promotion, and now they're the crew leader. Now they're going to be a 4 person, and the training they get literally is, here's a different color hard hat, the keys to a truck, and an iPad. Good luck tomorrow.
Yep.
And by the way, the 3 or 4 folks that used to be on your crew that were your peers and your buddies, you're now their boss, and they hate you. And I mean, you talk about setting somebody up for failure. So that is
Hmm.
really one of the huge, in terms of education, the gaps that we really try to fill. And it's, I can't tell, I can't tell you how many grown adults we've had cry in class, just thank us for the training. Wish I'd have had this to start. Had a couple of people call break one time. They're like, I gotta go apologize to my crew. And I'm like, no, that's not what we're here for. It's not that you've been doing
Yeah.
it wrong. But it's truly amazing when the culture from 20 years ago, that real sort of, I'm the boss, you listen to me, I work from the neck up, you work from the neck down. That's the way people learn to lead. And so when they
Hmm.
Hmm.
get appointed to a leadership role, that's the way they think they have to lead. And it's the only way they really know how to lead. And
Yep.
so just exposing them to different leadership styles and strategies and seeing the light bulb goes off, it is honestly, that's one of the things that makes me the happiest, when you can truly tell that somebody's being impacted and just thinking a little bit about, this is worth listening to, this is worth trying. And
Hmm.
then what really gratifies me more than anything is when people come back and they're, I use this, it's really working well at work, but man, that stuff, like I'm using it to teach my teenager to drive, or I'm using it with my friends, or I'm coaching this sports team. That's when people are really truly like valuing it, and it's
Hmm.
not just something that they have to do now. And when you get to that point, that excites me so much. So that's what I am by far most passionate about, is just not the art of safety, like I said, not the science of safety,
Hmm.
and, and really helping people grow their skills in that, because it's safety is something we're all pretty darn good at to start with. That's what I say. Educate, empower, enhance. That's a lot of what we try to do.
David, you said like these guys come to you after, their first conference and getting this information and learning how to be a leader, and they're so relieved. It's because they've had these guys' lives put in their hands, and they have no clue how to make sure they go home at night.
Right. Right.
So so you're handing these guys, well, not only do you get this truck and this clipboard and this iPad and a different kind of hard hat, you get these 5 guys or 10 guys, you get their lives and put in your hands too. And that, to me, that doing that without training, or without some form of guidance or leadership from above is just insane.
Yes, and Jerry, I mean, great point, because if I'm responsible for your safety and I don't know any other way to do it, what am I going to do? I'm going to micromanage the crap out of you and make sure you get everything right. And I'm going to make all the decisions for you. Again, this concept of I'm treating you like a robot, right? And I do it with good intentions. And it really, like I said, I mean, when you freeing may be the wrong word for it, but it really is freeing to people to understand, because most people don't like to micromanage other people, and very few of us, situationally maybe, like to be
Well, we don't have the time to
But
micromanage with all the other stuff that you got to do.
but it's what you gravitate towards if you don't know better. Like, to
Right.
your point, I care about you. I want you to go home. Here's how I'm going to do that: is to make all the decisions for you, micromanage you, and make sure you get it right. And that's going to work, but that's also, to your point, a lot of work, a lot of effort, and a lot of stress, and it's unsustainable over time.
It drives that wedge between the worker and the manager, and it's a booger all the way around for sure.
It's really about setting clear expectations of what you expect of your people, right? And I give a good example. The last supervisor I worked for before I became a supervisor was that micromanager, and I hated it. And he'd call you a couple times a day. Hey, how's things going? Need anything? Blah, blah. And we'd tell him all the time, listen, you don't have to call. If I got a problem or I'm running, don't worry, I'll let you know. Right. But it was something as simple as, when I became a supervisor, I vowed I would not be like that individual, right? That just wasn't. And I grew up in the air, like you talked about, Dave, where, just do what I tell you, do it this way, whatever the case may be. But, from that conversation, when I became a supervisor, I just simply told my crew, hey, the expectation is when I give you work for the day that by the end of the day, the work will be done. If everything goes right, the jobs you're given for the day should be done that day, unless it's a longer project. And then you'll know that, right? Hey, this is a 2-day project or a week-long project, whatever the case may be. And then that's your expectation to complete. But I just set a clear expectation with my crew that said, hey, by 2:00 in the afternoon, if you aren't going to get done today for whatever reason, you ran into problems, whatever the case is, you need to call me and say, hey, we ran into problems. We're not going to get done today. We're going to have to come back tomorrow and finish it up. And just that one expectation cleared all that micromanaging that we used to have to deal with. And to Jerry's point, I can't even fathom how somebody has enough time in a day as a supervisor in the utility industry to micromanage people. Like, I'd have less hair than I do have. I don't know why somebody would even want to be there. And a lot of it is trust, right? You got to trust your people and know that they have the best intentions and they want to do right and all those kinds of things. So yeah, it's sometimes a tough thing to deal with, but there's definitely things you can do to set yourself up for success when it comes to that leadership role. So
yeah, and we're definitely going to need to bring David back again to get more in depth, a little more in depth on the hurdles and the books, and how to get all the good stuff. Speaking of the books, how does someone order a book if they want to know more? If they want to preempt our next podcast, David, how do they find your book? So books plural.
Where you find everything in today's world on Amazon. Or you can go to our website, incident-prevention.com, and you'll find it there. But Amazon's probably the easiest route, and it'll be there by 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. They're amazing.
Yeah.
Cool.
Incident-prevention.com. Also the same place you sign up for the Utility Safety Conference and Expo. It's in April,
It's
I believe.
April. The last week of April. So actually April 29th to May 1st in Charleston, South Carolina. Fun place to come to start with. Great location. It's going to be a good conference. The call for presentations is out right now. So if anybody wants to submit for that, we've got some speakers already lined up. So it's going to be a fantastic event, and I hope to see everybody there.
From an exhibitor standpoint, it's always a phenomenal show. From a speaker standpoint, it's a phenomenal turnout with eager participants. And just guys, do not miss an opportunity to go there. Also, that's a great venue. I think it's 4 years ago that y'all were in Charlotte last time. Was it about that 4 years ago? No, 5 years ago, right before COVID. We were in Charlotte. Got to go to the NASCAR museum.
So we're in Charleston this time.
Or Charleston, Charleston.
4 years ago. And we did the reception was at the NASCAR Hall of Fame. Everybody enjoyed it except me. I'm not one. I say in all my training, A, B, C, D, E. Accuse, complain, defend, deny, make excuses, never do that. But the simulation where you got to race the car, mine was broken, and I kept finishing last place, and so I didn't have as much fun as everybody else did at the reception. But that was a good conference, and definitely one of our, I thought, really good reception.
And I know I sound like an idiot saying Charlotte. I just got back from Charlotte, which is why it's still in my head. So,
the first three letters right anyway.
Yeah. So, guys, once again, David, thank you for hanging out with us. We'll have you back soon for the next one, man, and really get into the books a lot more. Once again, this podcast, brought to you by T&D PowerSkills. Take back control of your training message, your delivery, and your cost. 78-unit curriculum designed with the adult learner in mind. Control your delivery. Know when they're going to get it, how they're going to get it. Control your message. Know what you're teaching them, what you want them to learn, and the consistency of what they get. Also, and control the cost. All you got to do is give me a holler. We'll find the delivery model and method specific to what you need, and it is truly customizable. tdpowerskills.com. Check us out. Also, in closing, the views and opinions shared in this podcast are the personal viewpoints of participants and may not necessarily reflect the stance of the Institute for Safety and Powerline Construction, T&D PowerSkills, and its staff. It is highly advised to consult your company management before implementing any actions or policy changes. Please support the sponsors bringing this content to you. And for more episodes of the ISPC Tailboard Talks, subscribe in your favorite podcatcher and be sure to leave a review. We would absolutely love to hear from you. Send questions, send comments. Let us know if you have questions that you would like addressed, especially with our guests.
Yeah, Dave, appreciate your time today. It was great. We will absolutely have you back. I got about 3 topics on my head that I think we can run with. So we'll absolutely do that. We appreciate your time, taking some time out of your day to visit with us.
My honor. Thank you for having me.
So
yeah, you've already admitted willingness, man. You're done.
Yeah.
I can't wait to come back. This was fun. Thank you both.
Yeah, no problem. Again, till next time on ISPC Tailboard Talks. Thanks everybody for listening. I guess too, I never did it before, but if you're interested in some other things that ISPC provides, you can check us out at our website as well, ispconline.com. And just like T&D PowerSkills, we'd love to hear from you and see how we can help you with your safety and training efforts at your organization. So again, thanks Jerry, thanks Dave. It's been a pleasure, and we'll catch you next time on ISPC Tailboard Talks.